The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestones of Windsor Castle as Lady Eleanor Pemberton stepped out of her sleek black Mercedes. At 28, she carried herself with the confidence that came from a lifetime of privilege. Her designer heels clicking against the ancient stones, with practiced elegance. The daughter of Queen Camilla from her first marriage. Eleanor had always lived in the unique position of being royal adjacent, but never quite belonging to the inner circle of the monarchy. Today was different, though. Today, she wore something that would change everything. Around her neck hung the magnificent sapphire and diamond necklace that had once belonged to Queen Elizabeth II. A piece so iconic that its image had graced countless magazine covers and royal portraits. The deep blue stones caught the morning light, sending prismatic flashes across the castle walls as Eleanor made her way toward the main entrance. She had taken the necklace from her mother's private collection just hours earlier, telling herself it was only borrowing. After all, Camilla was now queen consort, and these jewels were part of the royal collection. Eleanor reasoned that she had every right to wear them to today's charity gala. The event was being held in honor of children's literacy, a cause close to the late queen's heart. And Eleanor felt the jewelry would be a fitting tribute. What she hadn't counted on was Sergeant Major William Davies. Davies had served the royal family for over 30 years, beginning his career as a young guardsman under Queen Elizabeth II herself. He had stood watch during countless state occasions, witnessed moments of triumph and tragedy, and developed an encyclopedic knowledge of royal protocol and possessions. More importantly, he had loved and respected the late queen with the fierce loyalty that only comes from years of dedicated service. As Eleanor approached the castle's north entrance, Davies was conducting his morning inspection of the guards. His weathered face, marked by decades of military discipline, remained impassive as he reviewed the positioning of each sentry. But when he turned and caught sight of Eleanor, his breath caught in his throat. The necklace. He recognized it immediately. Davies had been present when Queen Elizabeth II had worn that very piece to her Diamond Jubilee celebration. He remembered how the late queen had touched it gently before entering Westminster Abbey, a small gesture of nervous energy that humanized the otherwise regal figure. He had also been there when she wore it to her final official portrait session, just months before her passing. The sight of it now, draped around the neck of someone he viewed as an outsider to the true royal family, sent a surge of protective anger through his chest. Eleanor noticed the guard's intense stare but dismissed it as typical protocol. She was used to being watched whenever she visited royal properties. Security was always heightened, and she understood that her position, as Camilla's daughter, made her both protected and scrutinized. "Good morning, Sergeant Major," she said with a polite nod as she passed. Davies said nothing, but his jaw tightened. He watched as Eleanor continued toward the entrance, the sapphires glinting with each step. Other staff members began to take notice as well. A young palace aide gasped quietly when she recognized the jewelry, while a senior butler's eyes widened in recognition. Word traveled quickly through the castle's service corridors. Whispers followed Eleanor's path like ripples in a pond. The late queen's necklace was being worn by Camilla's daughter, and no one was quite sure what to make of it. Davies felt his hands clench into fists at his sides. He had sworn an oath to protect the royal family and their heritage. In his mind, this felt like a violation of everything he had dedicated his life to preserving. The jewelry wasn't just expensive trinkets. They were symbols of centuries of British history, pieces that connected the current monarchy to its storied past. As Eleanor disappeared into the castle's interior, Davies made a decision that would soon echo through the halls of power. He couldn't let this stand. Not on his watch. He began walking with purposeful strides toward the main reception area, where he knew Eleanor would likely be meeting with other charity organizers before the event. His military bearing was more pronounced than usual, his spine straighter, his expression more determined. Other guards noticed the change in their leader's demeanor. Davies was known for his calm professionalism, but something was different today. There was an energy about him that spoke of barely contained emotion. Meanwhile, Eleanor was settling into the ornate drawing room where the charity meeting was to take place. She felt confident and beautiful. unaware that her choice of jewelry was causing a stir throughout the castle. The necklace felt heavy against her collarbone, but it was the weight of history and importance that she found thrilling. She checked her reflection in one of the room's gilded mirrors, adjusting the necklace slightly to catch the light better. In her mind, she looked every inch the royal she felt she deserved to be recognized as. The other charity organizers began arriving, and Eleanor noticed their glances lingering on her jewelry. She interpreted their stares as admiration, not recognizing the mixture of shock and concern that actually colored their expressions. Outside the drawing room, Davies had positioned himself strategically. He could see Eleanor through the partially open door, and each glimpse of the necklace stoked the fire of his indignation. He thought of all the times he had watched Queen Elizabeth II wear those very jewels, of the dignity and earned authority she had brought to every appearance. The comparison felt like sacrilege. As more people gathered for the meeting, Davies knew his window of opportunity was closing. Soon, Eleanor would be surrounded by too many witnesses, too many complications. If he was going to act, it had to be now. He straightened his dress uniform one final time and stepped forward, his decision made. The confrontation that was about to unfold would be talked about in royal circles for years to come, a moment when duty and emotion collided in the most public way possible. The stage was set for a clash between old guard loyalty and new family dynamics. Between tradition and entitlement, between a man who had devoted his life to serving the crown and a woman who felt she deserved to wear its treasures, Sergeant Major Davies stepped into the drawing room with the bearing of a man on a mission. The conversations in the room gradually died as his imposing figure commanded attention. Eleanor looked up from her position near the window, initially pleased to see the distinguished guard approaching. She assumed he was there to provide some sort of ceremonial greeting or security briefing. "Lady Eleanor," Davies said, his voice carrying the crisp authority of 3 decades of military service. "I need to speak with you immediately." 9. Takes ETET. Takes ETET. End quote. Lady Eleanor. The charity organizers exchanged uncertain glances. This was highly unusual. Palace staff typically remained invisible during such gatherings, speaking only when spoken to and never interrupting proceedings. Eleanor smiled graciously, still unaware of the storm brewing. "Of course, Sergeant Major. How can I help you?" Davies' eyes fixed on the necklace, and his expression hardened. "That jewelry you're wearing, ma'am. It belonged to Her late Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II. I was present when she wore it on multiple occasions, including her final official portrait. With respect, I must ask why you're wearing it today." The room fell silent. Eleanor's smile faltered as she realized this wasn't a routine interaction. The other attendees shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension that had suddenly filled the air. "I beg your pardon?" Eleanor said, her voice rising slightly. Davies took another step forward, his posture rigid. "Ma'am, that necklace is part of the Crown's historic collection. It's not a piece for casual wearing. It represents the dignity and legacy of our late Queen, and seeing it worn without proper authorization is deeply troubling." Eleanor felt heat rise to her cheeks. She wasn't accustomed to being challenged, especially not by palace staff. "Sergeant Major Davies, I think you've overstepped your bounds. This jewelry belongs to my mother, the Queen Consort. I have every right to wear it. With respect, ma'am, that's not how the crown jewels work," Davies replied, his voice growing firmer. "These pieces aren't personal property. They belong to the monarchy itself, held in trust for the British people. Queen Elizabeth II wore them as part of her duties, not as personal accessories." The confrontation was drawing attention from beyond the drawing room. Palace staff began gathering in the corridor, whispering among themselves. This was unprecedented, a senior guard publicly challenging a member of the royal family. Eleanor stood straighter, drawing on the authority she felt her position gave her. "How dare you lecture me about royal protocol? I am Queen Camilla's daughter. These jewels are part of our family's heritage now." "No, ma'am. Davies said firmly. "You are not part of the direct line of succession. You have no claim to those jewels, and wearing them dishonors the memory of the woman who earned the right to wear them through 70 years of dedicated service." The words hit Eleanor like a slap. The careful distinction Davies was making between her status and that of the core royal family was both accurate and humiliating. She was Camilla's daughter from her first marriage, not King Charles's stepdaughter in any official sense. Her position was courtesy, not constitutional. "This is outrageous," Eleanor said, her voice shaking with anger and embarrassment. "You're a guard. You don't get to decide who wears what, or question the royal family's decisions." Davies didn't back down. If anything, his resolve seemed to strengthen. "Ma'am, I swore an oath to protect the crown and its traditions. For 30 years, I watched Queen Elizabeth II carry herself with dignity and earn every honor she received. Those jewels represent that legacy. They're not costume pieces for someone looking to feel important." Gasps rippled through the gathering crowd. Davies had crossed a line that palace staff never crossed. He was directly challenging Eleanor's motives and character. Eleanor's face flushed red. "How dare you imply that I'm some sort of imposter? My mother is queen consort. That makes me royal family." "It makes you related to royalty?" Davies corrected coldly. "It doesn't make you royalty itself. And it certainly doesn't give you the right to treat priceless historical artifacts as your personal jewelry box." The charity organizers looked mortified. This was supposed to be a simple meeting about children's literacy programs, not a public referendum on royal hierarchy and worthiness. Eleanor felt trapped and humiliated. Everyone was staring at her, and Davies' words were cutting deep into insecurities she tried hard to hide. She had always felt like an outsider in royal circles, accepted but never truly belonging. Now this guard was saying out loud what she feared others thought privately. "You are completely out of line," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm going to report this to my mother immediately. You'll be dismissed from service." Davies straightened even further, if that was possible. "Ma'am, if standing up for the proper respect of Queen Elizabeth II's memory costs me my position, then so be it. I've served this family faithfully for 3 decades. I won't stand by and watch someone who hasn't earned the privilege treat royal treasures like party accessories." The crowd in the corridor had grown larger. Word was spreading quickly through the castle that something dramatic was happening. Cell phones were discreetly emerging from pockets as people began documenting the unprecedented confrontation. Eleanor realized that this had spiraled far beyond what she could control. What had started as a simple charity meeting was becoming a public spectacle that would likely reach the media within hours. "You've made a terrible mistake, Sergeant Major," she said, trying to regain some authority. "This conversation is over." She turned to leave, but Davies called after her. "Ma'am, I respectfully request that you remove that necklace before you leave the castle. It belongs here, not at some charity event where it might be lost or damaged." Eleanor spun around, fury blazing in her eyes. "No, ma'am," Davies replied quietly. "But I have authority over what happens in this castle. And I'm telling you that necklace shouldn't leave these walls." The standoff was complete. Eleanor, humiliated and angry, faced off against Davies, who stood firm in his conviction that he was protecting something sacred. Neither was willing to back down, and the growing crowd of witnesses ensured that whatever happened next would become palace legend. The weight of the sapphire necklace around Eleanor's neck suddenly felt crushing. No longer a symbol of status, but a burden that was destroying her dignity with each passing moment. But pride prevented her from giving Davies the satisfaction of removing it. The confrontation had reached its peak, but the consequences were only beginning to unfold. The tension in the drawing room had reached a breaking point when the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor. The crowd parted as Sir Edward Fitzpatrick, the private secretary to King Charles III, appeared in the doorway. His usually composed face showed signs of urgency and concern as he surveyed the scene before him. "What exactly is happening here?" Sir Edward asked, his voice carrying the quiet authority that came with his position as one of the most senior palace officials. Eleanor seized the opportunity to regain control. "Sir Edward, thank goodness you're here. This guard has been incredibly rude and insubordinate. He's questioned my right to wear family jewelry and caused a public scene." Davies remained at attention but spoke clearly. "Sir, with respect, Lady Eleanor is wearing Queen Elizabeth II's sapphire and diamond necklace without proper authorization. I felt it was my duty to address this situation." Sir Edward's eyes immediately focused on the necklace, and Eleanor saw recognition flash across his features. She realized with growing dread that Davies wasn't the only one who would recognize the piece. "I see," Sir Edward said carefully, clearly weighing his words. "Lady Eleanor, might I ask how you came to be wearing that particular piece today?" Eleanor felt the walls closing in around her. "It was in my mother's collection. I thought it would be appropriate for the charity event. I was honoring the late Queen's memory." "The piece you're wearing," Sir Edward said gently but firmly, "is currently part of a traveling exhibition catalogue. It was specifically set aside for a memorial display honoring Queen Elizabeth II that opens next month at the National Gallery. It shouldn't have been available for personal use." The revelation hit Eleanor like a physical blow. She suddenly understood that this wasn't just about protocol or respect. She had unknowingly interfered with official royal duties and memorial plans. Davies allowed himself a slight nod of vindication, but his expression remained professional. "Sir, I was present when Her late Majesty wore that necklace for what would be her final official portrait. The image is being used as the centerpiece of the memorial exhibition." Eleanor felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. What had seemed like a simple act of borrowing jewelry had become a complex web of protocol violations and disrespected memorial plans. "I didn't know," she said quietly, her earlier defiance crumbling. "Mother never mentioned anything about exhibitions or special designations." Sir Edward's expression softened slightly. "Lady Eleanor, I'm certain there was no malicious intent. However, this situation has created some complications that we need to address immediately." See Hom. 147. By now, several people in the crowd were clearly recording the interaction on their phones. Eleanor noticed the devices and felt a wave of panic wash over her. This confrontation was going to be public knowledge within hours. "Sir," Davies spoke up, "might I suggest that we resolve this matter privately? The situation has already drawn more attention than is appropriate." For the first time since the confrontation began, Eleanor felt grateful toward the sergeant major. Despite their conflict, he was trying to protect her from further embarrassment. Sir Edward nodded. "Indeed. Lady Eleanor, perhaps you could accompany me to my office where we can discuss this matter properly?" Eleanor looked around the room at the faces staring back at her. The charity organizers appeared mortified by the spectacle, while palace staff showed a mixture of sympathy and second-hand embarrassment. She realized that her attempt to feel more royal had backfired spectacularly. "Of course," she said quietly, reaching up to unclasp the necklace. Her hands shook slightly as she struggled with the complex fastening. Davies stepped forward, his earlier hostility replaced by professional courtesy. "Allow me, ma'am," he said, moving to help her with the clasp. As Davies carefully removed the necklace, Eleanor felt a complex mixture of emotions. Relief at having the weight lifted from her shoulders, mixed with deep embarrassment at how the situation had unfolded. The jewelry that had made her feel powerful and important now felt like evidence of her fundamental misunderstanding of her place in the royal hierarchy. "Thank you," she whispered to Davies as he handed the necklace to Sir Edward. Davies met her eyes for the first time with something approaching kindness. "Ma'am, for what it's worth, my objection was never personal. The Queen's memory means a great deal to those of us who served her." Eleanor nodded, finally understanding the depth of feeling that had driven Davies' reaction. "I understand that now. I'm sorry for the disruption." The crowd began to disperse as Sir Edward efficiently took control of the situation. "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we can allow Lady Eleanor and the charity organizers to proceed with their important work. Thank you for your discretion in this matter." As people filtered away, Eleanor found herself facing an uncertain future. She knew that word of this confrontation would spread. Despite Sir Edward's diplomatic requests for discretion, her relationship with the palace staff would be forever changed, and she would have to face her mother's questions about how she had gained access to restricted jewelry. But perhaps most importantly, she finally understood something that had eluded her throughout her adult life. Being connected to royalty wasn't the same as being royal. The respect and deference she craved had to be earned through service and dedication, not claimed through association or assumption. Davies, meanwhile, found himself facing his own moment of reflection. His passionate defense of the late Queen's memory had been vindicated, but he wondered if there might have been a more diplomatic way to handle the situation. His military training had taught him to address problems directly, but palace life required more nuance. As Eleanor left the castle later that day, she carried herself differently. The confident stride was gone, replaced by a more thoughtful, subdued manner. The confrontation with Davies had been humiliating, but it had also been educational. She had learned hard truths about her position, her assumptions, and the difference between privilege and respect. The charity event proceeded without the sapphire necklace, and Eleanor wore her own jewelry instead. It was beautiful but unremarkable, and for the first time in years, she found herself focusing on the cause itself rather than her appearance at the event. In the weeks that followed, the incident became the subject of much palace gossip. But it also led to clearer guidelines about access to historic jewelry and better communication about memorial exhibition plans. Davies remained in his position, his actions viewed by senior staff as appropriate given the circumstances, though delivered with perhaps more force than strictly necessary. Eleanor's relationship with her mother, Queen Camilla, was strained for several months as they worked through the implications of what had happened, but eventually, it led to more honest conversations about Eleanor's role and expectations. Conversations that should perhaps have happened years earlier. The sapphire necklace found its proper place in the memorial exhibition, where millions of visitors would see it as part of a tribute to Queen Elizabeth II's remarkable life and service. And sometimes, when Davies was on duty at the National Gallery events, he would pause before that display case and remember the morning when defending the Queen's memory had required him to risk everything he had worked for. The confrontation at Windsor Castle became a turning point for everyone involved. A moment when assumptions were challenged, truths were revealed, and the complex dynamics of modern royalty were laid bare for all to see.